Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BAInsights. And today we're talking about definition of done and acceptance criteria. I've got two excellent guests once again to talk about this topic with me. Um, let's go in and introduce themselves. I'll ask them to introduce themselves very shortly. Just before I do, if you're watching this, you haven't subscribed, please do, because it definitely helps. Hit the bell notification as well so that you get early visibility that the videos are posted. Please leave a like because that's always helpful. And importantly as well, and lastly, if you've got anything you want to share on top of what you hear from Rachael, Nitin and myself, you want to share your opinions on definition of done and acceptance criteria, be excellent to hear what you've got to say and share your experience as well. But let's get on with the session. Starting with some instructions. Commencing with yourself, if we may, please, Rachael.
Hi, I am Rachael Wilterdink. I am from the United States. Wisconsin is where I live in the United States. I have been a BA. This is actually my 20th year anniversary of being a BA. And I love being a business analyst. I transitioned to agile ways of working around 2011, so 14 years as an agilist. And my current role, I've been in for about a half a year as an Agile Coach. So prior to that, I was a senior business analyst on a different team within my company. I love talking about Agile things, business analysis topics, so I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachael. And Nitin, your introduction as well, please.
Thanks, John. Thank you for inviting me on this call. I'm a CBAP certified business analyst, have been in the industry for quite some time now. I was the lead business analyst on my previous project within my company. Now I have moved to a product owner role, and I've been exploring that role now. I love creating content related to business analysis, and my content has been featured on IIBA's website, on other websites as well. So yeah, thanks, John. Thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nitin. And definitely I can tell from your introductions, you're more than qualified to talk about business analysis, definition of done, acceptance criteria, agile, and a few things in between as well. So definitely look forward to hearing what you've got to say. Let's start then with a quite fundamental question, really, in terms of definition of done, acceptance criteria. That's really, what are they, and why are they crucial from a business analysis perspective? And I wonder, Rachael, would you get us started on that, please?
Sure. So definition of done is really about the increment or a user story and whether it meets that criteria. So it's generally a checklist that applies to most items in your product backlog. And it tends to be a little bit higher level. And then acceptance criteria are more detailed, specifically to that particular user story. And again, it's like a checklist of kind of pass or fail. Does it meet the business need? Is it basically doing what it's supposed to do? So it's kind of your boundaries too that tells you when to stop building too.
Brilliant, excellent. So that checklist, so we know actually that we've achieved what we set out to.
Exactly.
Nitin, anything you'd like to add on that same question, please?
Yeah, sure. Rachael has explained it quite well. So I'm just going to add a few more pointers to that. So for me, definition of done is which ensures quality and consistency across your team. And like Rachael highlighted, it is at a higher level. And for me, acceptance criteria is limited to the user story, which makes sure that the user story delivers value and it is accepted by the stakeholders.
Brilliant. And I think, just building on what you both said there as well, I mean, I think, having that definition of done, the acceptance criteria at different levels, not only does it give us that view as to when we stopped, but actually when we've reached the right level of expected quality, whether it's across the product or for the specific deliverables as well. And to that point, I mean, it ensures that what we're delivering, what we're requesting, what the stakeholders ask for, that we're making sure that it is actually testable so that we can recognize those points of when it's finished or when it's ready for purpose as well. Probably one last thing there as well, of course, is that when it comes to definition of done, and particularly acceptance criteria, it's generally a piece of information that business analysts capture as part of their stories as well. But I'm sure we'll talk about that. So I wonder, Nitin, I'll start with you first on this one, in terms of what are the key elements that should be included in a well-crafted acceptance criteria?
So for me, the first thing is not to just talk about the positive or happy parts. Also mention the negative or those edge cases. That's one of the most important thing. And there are a couple of other things which I look into is it should be clear, it should be concise, it should be, like you mentioned, John, it should be testable. So do not include jargons, do not include any, do not go into too much technical details when writing the acceptance criteria. Keep them clear, keep them in a language which can be understood by all the stakeholders, whether they are from business, whether they are from testing or from the development side. So that is something which I personally look into while writing the acceptance criteria.
Yeah, that's really good point about the jargon, I guess, like acronyms as well, so that actually people can understand what's being requested. Yeah, that's so excellent point. Rachel, what were your perspective on the same point?
For me, it's important that you understand your audience on top of everything that Nitin said, which is all very valid. There are different styles, different approaches to writing acceptance criteria. Right now, I'm actually building a workshop, and I'll be conducting that next week with one of our teams here on behavior-driven development style of acceptance criteria, which I particularly love because it's very structured, it's very logical. It forces you to think through all those scenarios, including the negative scenarios, to Nitin's point, the exception paths, the alternative paths through a system. And it also helps give you clues to whether or not your story is maybe too large. If your list of scenarios grows and grows and grows, that's a clue that you probably need to split that story and make it smaller. I also like what Nitin said about it being very clear, concise, unambiguous, making sure, again, that it's in business language that anyone could understand. And again, not technical, not solutioning, not stating how it will be implemented, but the what. And so, yeah.
Would you mind, you mentioned behavior-driven style there, Rachel. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about what you mean by behavior-driven style, if you could?
Sure. So behavior-driven development is sort of an extension of test-driven development. And I mean, there's so much behind it. I don't want to go too into detail, but essentially you're looking at the behaviors of the users and what they expect to be able to achieve. And so it kind of follows a structured format, which is given, when, then statements. So given is basically, I think of this similar to a old school use case, which is one of the very first business analysis techniques I ever learned in my BA career, which I'm not a huge fan of the use case now, but I feel parts of it are still really relevant. So the given is, these are your preconditions. So these are the things that must be true for you to be able to, start this. And then when is a trigger that causes some sort of action to happen. And then when are essentially your post conditions. So this is what will be true after. And so it's very structured, it's very logical. And the great thing about this as well is that it can be extended then using this, what's called Gherkin language, into building out automated test cases. There are lots of different tools and technology out there, Cucumber being one of the more popular ones, that can really take your story and your acceptance criteria and make it automated testable. So it's great.
And that behavior-driven approach that you mentioned as well, it fits nicely with the way that, or the structured way of writing the early part of your stories, in terms of,
right.
As I would like, in order to. And I think it's quite nice. It's a natural extension to start thinking about, right now I've articulated what it is I need, from which perspective and why.
Yes.
Before we delay, let's actually go on and think about what is acceptable to me, what is the behavior, the outcomes that I'm expecting to see, so I can inform, the development team or whoever's supplying the resolution. So they
exactly.
Know when.
Yep.
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying that as well, Rachel. As well. I think on top of what you've both really added there, I think the key elements within a well-crafted acceptance criteria that I might add is really just thinking about the limits of functionality that are being delivered, so that we avoid scope creep as well. I think that's possibly all I can add on top of what you've both said. You've been very clear as to what is acceptance criteria and what the key elements of it are. Particularly, Rachel, as you kindly took us through the behavioural style of writing it. So it's a nice segue as well. Thanks again, Rachel. You've given us a nice good, sort of segue almost into the next question around, techniques that we use to ensure acceptance criteria or definition are done, are clear, measurable, and testable. As you mentioned, the Gherkin style and the given, when, then as a technique or approach for acceptance criteria. Yep. I wonder, Rachel, are there any other techniques that you use for acceptance criteria or DoD?
Yeah, I would say do it in a collaborative fashion, not alone in a room by yourself. I mean, the three amigos technique, if you've ever heard of that, is basically getting together a business representative, be that a BA or a product owner or both, a tester, and then a technical person, an architect, ideally, and having that be sort of a joint activity to write out your acceptance criteria ensures that everyone has a shared understanding of what the desired outcomes are. And you're also, because you have the different perspectives, everyone's able to come at it from their own particular lens, their view, right? So testers want to make sure you are including all those negative scenarios, right? Whereas BAs tend to think more happy path just naturally, I think. And then having a technical person there also gives you, although you're not trying to solution, you're not trying to build out the technical aspects, they will know questions to ask and things to talk about that the product owner as a non-technical person might not even think to, talk about or explore. So having all those various perspectives makes sure that you're building a holistic set of acceptance criteria, not just from one particular person's role or perspective.
That's right. And I guess at this point we should add that even though it's the three amigos, the technique, as you shared, we can make it the six amigos if that's appropriate, to just make sure we've got those perspectives. But it's definitely useful, as you say, to the earlier visibility we can share with those groups, like the development team or the test team, all the better. It gives them a chance to share their perspective on what they're interpreting from the requirement, what they're not getting from it, what they need. So I think it's excellent advice, Rachel. Thank you. Nitin, anything from you?
I mean, absolutely. With Rachel on the point, mentioned that collaboration is the most important, because none of the techniques which we read or which we know about is going to work without collaboration while writing the acceptance criteria. The other, Rachel has covered most of it, but one element which I wanted to cover was which I personally used as well, is wireframing and prototyping. So sometimes if you bring life to those those narratives, it brings up those edge cases, brings up those negative scenarios as well, and possibly something which the rest of the team haven't seen. So it could be like a behavior which the team was not aware, an error which the team was not aware about. So including all those things in acceptance criteria does help in long run.
I would add too, John, if you don't mind, not just to have your acceptance criteria in just words. So I really like what Nitin said about prototyping having visuals. People tend to be much more visual, and they would rather look at a picture than read words. Like, this is just a human nature kind of a thing. And plus, as professional business analysts, we have over 50 techniques, right, in our BABOK, our BABOK. And you should be including multiple models, not just the words, right? So if you need a data flow diagram or a data dictionary, or you need a prototype, a wireframe, or whatever it might be, any of the tools and techniques available to us, choosing the right tools for the right job at hand, right? Because if it's, say, for instance, like a business intelligence initiative, that would be completely different than software development, right? So you want to pick the right tool or the right technique and have a holistic view of the requirements and the acceptance criteria.
I'd agree. And what you both said there, I mean, it definitely illustrates that the acceptance criteria, the definition are done, even the stories in which these are housed, as an example, they're not, the BA shouldn't be constrained by only using those. They are some of the artifacts that we deliver, but absolutely, to Nitin's point, if there's a wireframe to accompany one or multiple stories, as an example, if there's models, as you say, that actually illuminate that story, even if there's pictures or photographs of scribbles and notes that the team have put together to bring this together, That's
Yep.
all perfectly acceptable. We're just trying to paint a picture to the developers, to the technologists and the architects and anyone else who's consuming these requirements so that they understand what it is we're asking for, what we're not asking for, the limits and all those other good things that you've touched on already as well.
Exactly.
So once again, you've which is always perfect. So you've answered the questions and captured some of the things that I might have said as well. I can always say that as a cop out and pretend that you already answered. I wonder, Nitin, are there any common mistakes that BAs make, or indeed anyone makes, when defining acceptance criteria or DODs? And how can these mistakes be avoided?
Yeah. So I would say the key elements which we discussed, mistakes are kind of opposite of it. Writing your acceptance criteria in technical terms, not being transparent with the stakeholders, not storing those acceptance criteria in a place which is accessible by all the stakeholders, because that's the primary key, right? Where everybody can read it, you can review it with your colleagues as well. And then I would say, did you say just the acceptance criteria, John, or you want to hear out the
acceptance criteria, definition of done? Yeah.
Okay. So for definition of done, for me, I have seen teams just sticking to, those basic definition of done and not maturing enough in the long run. So you start with, say, all my tests should be met, the code should be pushed in to the main branch. So these are kind of a basic definition of done checklist. But then once the team matures, once the team understands what definition of done is, you have to also look at scalability, you have to also look at security measures, you have to also look at vulnerability. So all these will also be part of your definition of done. So I would say maturity plays an important role when you write definition of done in long run.
Yeah, and that point you made, it takes us back to me thinking about value as well. That we're not just creating definition of done as a tick box that any sane developer, as an example, would do as a matter of course. We're trying to give them some useful instruction so that there's things that only apply in these situations that they need to think about as well. And as you say, I think as we get more mature in our thinking and as a team, particularly as we get more familiar with the product perhaps or the area we're working in, hopefully that will inform a richer set of a richer definition of done list, basically. Rachel, are there any common mistakes you would like to share?
Yes, absolutely. Well, number one is not having a definition of done or not having any acceptance criteria. I've seen plenty of empty stories that only have a story and no other details. Like, you can't expect someone to take that information and then go build something because there's no defined requirements. Essentially, it's just a wide open opportunity for someone to take and interpret that story and do whatever they want. So, but definition of done is often something I find absent. So before I started at my current company, I was a consultant for about a decade. So I worked in just tons of different industries, different companies, different geographies, different tech stacks. And one of the number one problems is literally not having a definition of done or definition of ready even, which to me, the definition of ready is about the story's suitability for development. Is it passing the criteria that you need to have for a developer to pick it up and run with it? Or is it full of holes and questions and technical stuff, right? There's a lot of things that could be wrong, but so make sure that a team has a definition of ready. Another mistake I would say is teams not revisiting it. Like, they define it when they come together initially and form their team, and then they never look at it again, or they put it on a wall and they forget about it. They don't even use it. Like, even if they have it, but if they don't use it, like, that's another issue. Another thing I've seen is sometimes companies, larger enterprises, have like an organizational definition of done. So making sure that you're also meeting organizational expectations in terms of that, especially in regulated industries where you could become audited and you want to make sure that you're meeting all those requirements as well. So just making sure you have them is step number one. And to Nitin's point, everything we said before, the opposite, like ambiguity, technical jargon, technical solutioning. Those are definitely common mistakes. I'd also say another big one I see is just laziness on the part of the VA. That's probably why I was asked to come do this workshop I'm going to be doing, because I looked at their stories and their acceptance criteria, and they're just a like copy and paste of the notes from a meeting or something. It's like they didn't actually take the time to think about what they heard. They just copied it, put it in there, and like, oh, that's good enough. No, it's not good enough. You have to actually think about it, do the analysis, right?
That's
And
it.
then, yeah, so just laziness. And again, there's different styles, right? So to me, the checklist style is like the laziest option that there is, where you're just basically doing kind of a brain dump of here's all the things that I think need to be on here. And some developers like that and actually prefer that, but it's not as thorough, right? You're not actually taking the time to logically go through all the scenarios, all the options. Again, most BAs tend to think more happy path, and like, so that's where having those different perspectives of different types of people on your team is really useful.
Yeah, I would agree. And that point around perspective is really important one, and it makes me think really that that I think in the better team, shall we say, they're probably spending time up front to agree, what the standard is that the team is setting. What is it the development team and the architects and testers need from the business analysts? How can the
Saves you
business
so
analysts
much
deliver?
time too,
Oh
because
yeah,
if you don't have a definition of done, you're going to run into all these issues because there will be open questions. There could be dependencies, there could be risks you're unaware of, assumptions that nobody's thought to, validate, is it true or not? There's just so many problems that come from not having a definition of done. Having one is just step number one.
that's it. And involved in
Just
those other perspectives as well, it takes the pressure off BA have to know all the answers, which I'm sure we don't know all the
True,
answers, but unbelievably, we probably know
absolutely.
probably a few we don't know, but also it gives us an opportunity to learn from new teams, new developers, architects, other BAs that we're working with as well, so that we're evolving, and I guess going back to the point Nitin made earlier, that definition of done can grow to be a bit more valuable than it might otherwise be as well. So yeah, so there's a lot of behavioural tips in there, Rachel, I think as well, to just not make ourselves an island, involve the wider team, be open to perspectives, encourage a bit of criticism as well. And actually, probably from a BA standpoint, don't just take the advice of the developers and the architects. You will also have a perspective why there's additional items or ways to consider definition of done that might be effective as well.
just adding one more point over there,
Yeah, sure.
John. One of the other mistakes which I have seen is BAs and the entire team not understanding the difference between definition of done and acceptance criteria. That is also one of the major mistakes which the team do, and that could be a possible reason of not writing them at all, or not having them at all on the project. But I believe BAs and the entire team doesn't understand how strong these two terms are. And your acceptance criteria is something which will give your testers a confidence of writing those test cases. And now AI is into picture, so it has become easier as well.
But that's it. Yeah, AI can give us a way to learn a little bit more about some of these terms that might be new to us in certain situations. But it's really valid point as well. And it's all very well talking amongst the team and agreeing what you're going to deliver and when and how you're going to do it. But if there's one of you, maybe it's the BA sitting there thinking, actually, I'm hearing these terms, everyone seems to agree to it. What is gherkin? What is cucumber? I've never heard of it. And actually, maybe they have. They just don't know the term. And
Could
so
be.
my best advice on that would actually just be to ask, start all rolling, being open with the team, being transparent, not being afraid to ask. But you can ask the question of AI as well and try and get your answers there. But it's important to make sure you know what it is that's being discussed as well,
Definitely.
which seems quite fundamental, but it can never be repeated too much, I think. So we've mentioned that a lot over this conversation so far, the different types of stakeholders and the importance of engaging with them. I wonder, Nitin, how do you work with stakeholders specifically to define and validate the acceptance criteria that you define?
So it's all about asking the right questions, John. So when I have these sessions with the stakeholders, the few of the questions which I ask them is, what does success look like to them? Are there any negative scenarios which they can think of on the top of their mind? Are there any pain points which they want to highlight? And then trying to make sure, and I make sure that the narratives or the outcomes of these discussions are converted in acceptance criteria, and that is again align to your testable, not in too much details, in technical details. And it should be unambiguous as well. And then having those refinement sessions, having those collaborative sessions with your product owners, with your developers, with your testers, the one which we just spoke about a few minutes back, 3 amigos, 6 amigos, and then using the acceptance criteria, using Jira's Confluence to have that transparency maintained along the team and storing those acceptance criteria over there.
And I want to pick up on something you said there, Nitin, which is absolutely right in terms of recording the outcomes of discussions. I mean, I've heard a few in some dark corridors, some terms about we're agile, we don't need to write stuff down. And of course, that's nonsense. So if you are the BA, sometimes you'll be facilitating conversations, sometimes you'll be part of it. But whatever happens, take responsibility to be the person that's going to record the outcome of those discussions, so that whether it's the user story or it's the pages that support it or the acceptance criteria, that the outcomes of those discussions are actually put to paper, so you don't have to rely on remembering it, and the development team don't have to remember it later on.
Well, AI can help with that too. It's really good at doing meeting summaries, especially if they're recorded.
It is absolutely, yeah. I can definitely attest to that. I use it to make sure that my notes after these sessions, I pick up some of the pertinent points as well.
We have been using Copilot in the in my current organization, so I think that has helped us in not just focusing on the meeting and not taking notes. And I think we all are habitual to that we have to take notes. But I think AI has helped a lot in making those mundane tasks more effective.
And it's nice because it's sort of definitely a balance there, isn't there? Because it's like we don't want to detract from the listening by putting too much of our focus on the notes. There's definitely times when if you completely ignore the notes, you've got no sense of reference, or certainly I haven't. So that as the conversation evolves, you've got nothing to rely on. So there is a balance. I don't think we can be entirely lazy on it.
In the early days of my BA career, I would use like legal notepads to take my notes, and I would just fill up drawer after drawer after drawer. And I mean, without those notepads, I would be dead. I'd forget everything that I heard, and I used my paper, but now I use technology. I mean, it's fantastic. But getting back to the stakeholder engagement question, if you don't have anything more, Nitin.
No, over to you, please.
I would say go back to your BA 101 roots. Start with who are the stakeholders? Like, I just met a product owner recently and she's like, I don't even know who my stakeholders are. I'm like, well, that's a big problem. Somebody should assist you in identifying who these people are. And she's brand new to being a product owner, so she had a lot of other things to worry about. But if you miss stakeholders, what do you miss? Requirements. Like, you need to understand your stakeholders. You need to identify them. You need to do analysis on them. Are they for you? Are they against you? How can, using force field analysis, how do you get them on your side so that they become more of a, cheerleader versus a detractor? You want to make sure you're communicating at the right level. Different people have different needs. Executives want it short and sweet. Your technical people might want, all the nitty-gritty details. So tailor your communications to your audience, but make sure you know who all the stakeholders are first.
That's it. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. You definitely need to know who you're speaking to. And actually, on that point, building on what you said as well, I think it's quite difficult sometimes for the BA to know whether what they're hearing from one stakeholder is accurate or whether it's biased or whether it's whether it just comes from a certain perspective. So the best way to find out is to encourage different perspectives, and if they're all saying the same thing, actually probably accurate. You probably don't need to do much more other than record it effectively. But if they're all saying something a little bit different, then you put more of your attention in that direction, I would say.
And you might want to do a workshop then instead of individual conversations. That way everyone can hear everyone else's perspective. You can have a conversation about it and hopefully come to a shared understanding.
That's it. And particularly if we're agile as well, being more collaborative, getting together as a team or a workshop, is definitely much better, as you say, than having those one-to-ones. And it takes a little bit of the frees up maybe a little bit more time for the BA who might otherwise attended 4 one-to-ones. They can attend 1 workshop. Admittedly, they might have to prepare a little bit more, but the net result is probably a little bit more time in their favour.
Yep.
I wonder as well, and Nitin, we'll start with you first on this one, how you handle situations where the user story is considered done, but doesn't quite meet business expectations. So, for example, the acceptance criteria was unclear or incomplete or misinterpreted in the first place. But that's not the only example.
My first reaction would be why that story was built then, if the acceptance criteria was not clear. So my first step would be to get that acceptance criteria in place, again by asking the questions which we just discussed, and then doing a follow-up session with the stakeholders to make sure that we are delivering business value to them, and getting that JIRA in place, making sure that this is delivered for the next sprint. So this is the short-term fix. The long-term fix would be, you absolutely highlighted correctly that why it didn't go well. To do that root cause analysis, was the BA not having the proper experience, was not having the proper knowledge to document the acceptance criteria, were the stakeholders not involved in that, was the technique used didn't include the right format or standard format. So that will be my long-term fix, and making sure that the team follows and understand what acceptance criteria is, in case they need a guideline or steps which has to be followed to get that acceptance criteria in place. I would be happy to document that.
And that answer then, it demonstrates the value of the team learning as they go, and actually factor in past experience, even if it's negative, whether that's through formal retrospectives or some other forum, but making sure that you're all learning from those mistakes that do crop up, making sure it doesn't happen again. So yeah, really good answer to that question. Thank you, Rachel.
Yes, well, you stole my answer, John. I was going to say retrospect that. Like, if you don't meet the expectations, did you miss requirements? Was something unclear? So I would definitely discuss that as a retrospective item and make sure that you're putting into place a way to avoid that sort of mistake in the future. Also, making sure that you're actually using your definition of done as a checklist and your acceptance criteria so that you can check the box, right? Did it meet the need or not? And if you're not using it in that fashion, you tend to get lazy and you forget about things, right? Also, I'd say there's no such thing as done, or sort of done, or partially done. Like, it's done or it's not done. And if it's not done according to your definition of done, you shouldn't be getting any credit or calling it out or showing it to your stakeholders because you did not meet the requirements or deliver the value that was expected.
That's it. Yeah, and even an individual story is closed, I think, and it shouldn't be. You're generally part of an agile team, and even if you're part of a waterfall team, you can be sufficiently adaptive to recognise. Let's introduce another story that
exactly.
at this time is very clear and actually covers what we need it to.
Right.
And let's make sure we don't close that one too early.
Right, because you're going to discover things as you go that you didn't expect, that you couldn't have predicted, and there's always weird edge cases and things you just don't expect, and just saying, okay, that's great, we missed this, we'll add it as a new story, we'll do it the next iteration. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
That's it.
It's a discovery process.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think I've never yet come across a project where every requirement was known and every BA knew every aspect and the team delivered everything that was intended to. Things crop up. It's just how you adapt to them and being honest and open and being open to reevaluating your approach is a good start as well.
Absolutely.
As well as taking note of all the things that you shared so far as well, of course.
Yeah.
I wonder, I mean, as you it feels like you've done a great job in terms of sharing some insight on acceptance criteria and definition of done. And hopefully, people who watch this will be better for it, and their acceptance criteria will be more accurate, relevant, useful, and not signed off or closed too early. But before we exit, is there any further insight, Rachel, that you would share? Any like
Yes,
tips or
actually.
guidance?
So I'm not sure if you're aware, but one of the authors of the original Scrum Guide recently published an expansion pack. So I think of games usually come with like expansion packs where you
That's
can
it.
extend your game, but they released an expansion pack, and in that expansion pack, they break out the definition of outcomes and outputs separately. And I thought that was really interesting because the outputs are the things that we do to achieve the outcomes. And so this concept of splitting these into two different things really interests me. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. I haven't really started to change anything that I do necessarily, but our organization is really looking to shift our mindset more to product. So outcomes instead of outputs, but the outputs are still necessary to get to the outcomes. So
Yeah, I mean, I
just
think it's
just wanted
really.
to like bring awareness to that fact that we could start to think about those maybe as separate concepts.
I think that's right. I think even if you don't think of them as separate concepts, but think of them, but making sure that we think how they relate to each other. So as a BA, you don't only focus on the output, and you realise actually someone's got to use that output for it to be valuable. Um, or if they're only focused on the outcome, well, actually, is there something tangible that would enable that outcome? And it's about making sure that both those things are recognised as part of our thought process. So I think it's a really, really perfect point to make in terms of additional tips, Rachel. Anyway. Nitin, anything further you'd like to share?
One just, I mean, kind of a summary, I would say, John, for definition
Sure.
of done and acceptance criteria. So definition, when we write definition of done, it is one of the most important part along with acceptance criteria while working in Agile. Reason being, the definition of done could be different or varied for the stakeholders who are working on the team. So a developer might just say, I've written the code, I'm done. BA might say, I've written the requirements, I'm done. Product owner might say, I've signed off the requirements, I'm done. So definition of done brings everyone together, make sure that you all are aligned and are working towards those outputs and outcomes in long term. And acceptance criteria, again, deliver the business value to achieve those outcomes and outputs for a team and organization.
Yeah, excellent point. I mean, all I would add to both what you've said, I mean, certainly it's able me to think about this particular point, but and it goes back to points that have been made before as well in terms of, go back to the start, make sure that before you start these things, everyone's clear on what we should be doing. We should be doing a definition of done. We should be doing acceptance criteria on their stories. Expand on that to make sure we know why as well. Because I think as soon as we start talking about why these things are important, those people that weren't familiar before will recognise it. And I think as well, just from a selfish perspective, I think just being able to explain why definition of done is important or acceptance criteria is important will consolidate it a bit more within yourself. You'll know a little bit more and you'll be a bit more confident about, why they're important because you're sharing it with other people as well. And that sort of hopefully continues that evolution of appreciation for both acceptance criteria, definition of done, which are both very key aspects of requirements and information that we provide as BAs. So I think by design, I should add, we've now reached a nice point in the session where actually we've probably given enough of our insight, particularly yourself, Rachel and Nitin. So thank you very much for that. I look forward to hearing from you again in the BA community, hopefully in BAInsights in the future as well. But in the meantime, thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Thanks,
Thank you,
Rachel.
John. Thanks, Nitin.